Hi everybody, I'm just going to be doing something a bit different today. I'm going to be looking at great albums, classic rock records, which are always deemed wonderful albums, which I say are ruined by the inclusion of a single track. Here is a really obvious example. Let's get into it. Let's be honest with ourselves. How many people listen to this album all the way through? We know at the beginning of side 2, Moonchild. Now, Moonchild, I really love that 2-minute track. It's followed by 10 minutes of The Dream and the Illusion, which is just blippy, bloppy, scrapey nonsense. And you're longing, the first time you're hearing it, you're wondering, is this going to end? Is they going to suddenly do something different? Let's be honest with ourselves. How many listen to this all the way through? You listen to that track once. I listen to the Moonchild and I take the needle off and I move it along. I mean, I Talk to the Wind is bad enough, but that is appalling. And this album's always seen as a great album. And, you know, let's face it, the Mellotron on here and the amazing 21st Century Schizoid Man is just an incredible opener. But please, it's ruined from classic status by that one track. 10 minutes of interminable rubbish. Another well-known record, this is a UK, this is not an original, this is a reissue of Aftermath, Rolling Stones, a UK copy because of the different tracks in US. Going Home, a terrible, awful, appalling track. 11 minutes, 35 seconds of cheesy blues workout, which in 1966 seemed to be a thing. 66, 67, bands like The Seeds, Love, a lot of bands were doing these longer tracks, which were just atrocious. Let's be honest, absolutely atrocious, and which mars this record, which otherwise has some of our best material. Oh my goodness. Do you agree? Now, this is contentious, and I'm not doing it to be contentious. You know, I'm not the greatest Beatles lover. I do like a lot of their songs, I'll be honest, and I quite like some of the early stuff. Now, some of you are going to say, well, what tracks are you going to choose on here? Now, I'm going to choose A Day in the Life as ruining this album, because you have the wonderful, the encapsulation between the first track, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, etc., and then it reprises on side 2. So you have all of these tracks in between, and it sort of makes a whole, even though I don't rate some of the songs on here, like George Harrison's song. I think is a droning nonsense and it's far too long. But A Day in the Life comes in at the end of side 2, after the reprise, and it always jars with me. Now, I don't listen to this album all the way through, and I haven't done many, many years. I tend to be quite selective with tracks. If I play any track off this album, it is probably A Day in the Life, but I cannot get to the fact that it comes after that reprise. What they should have done is start side 2 with that track, get rid of Harrison's rubbish, and and that's it, you know. And then put the reprise at the end of the record, because the reprise after A Day in the Life would have ruined it. But then, you know, this is not, I think any Beatles album, you could say, well, the White Album, Revolution #9, you know, there are many examples where I could have chosen a record where one track ruins it, i.e. anything with Ringo Starr, Yellow Submarine, etc. But A Day in the Life ruins this album for me. It's almost on a plane of its own and shouldn't even have been on here. Should have had a special EP or something. Kills it. It's too good, but Led Zeppelin 2, everyone goes, oh, what a great album, you know. Let's be honest, Moby Dick is just a piece of... You can listen to a drum solo once, and that's it, really. Occasionally, if you have it on in the background, fine, you know. Hats off. Bring It On Home is a fantastic finish. But Ramble On slightly has its duffer moments. But Moby Dick, come on. And I mentioned Hats Off just now because Led Zeppelin 3, I mean, there are some great tracks on here. I always really loved, where are we at here? That's the Way, Friends, great tracks, really, really interesting, lovely sort of melodies and stuff. But they seem to have this penchant for doing these boring bluesy workouts and these kind of like knocked together in the studio. And they're just making up as they go along. Like on the first album where Robert Plant goes each and every tay instead of day. I think just bleep the word. I'd rather have it bleeped than hear the wrong word. I'm not just saying this to be contentious. These things genuinely bug me. But Bronny or Stomp, and hats off to Roy Harper, Bronny or Stomp is okay. Now, apparently, you see, at the late 60s, early 70s, especially the late 60s, so this is on the cusp, the penultimate track on an album was always the worst album. It was always the weakest album. The producer or whatever, they put the order down, and the penultimate track tended to be the worst track. But I would argue the last track on here, Hats Off to Roy Harper, it's just one of those I'll just make up as we go along things. And after some of the heights that this album has reached, and okay, not everyone loves Led Zeppelin, and I tend to pick and select tracks. So these days, I don't tend to listen to whole albums. Not Zeppelin anyway. It's just a weak dip, and it just fades. And the album kind of like it's on a level where it's reached some highs, and then it just goes slumps to a really poor finish. Now, this album, not everyone's going to have heard. They're going to say, well, I don't really know. This suffers from the same problem that In the Court of the Crimson King suffers from. There's a track on here which is just scraping noises at the end of side one. And inevitably, it's the longest track on here, and it ruins and completely destroys this album, which has some wonderful stuff on it, some really some avant-garde moments, some lovely eccentricities. Just a wonderful, wonderful album, if it wasn't for that damn track. And how many people have listened to that album all the way through? More than once. All right, now this slightly contentious, but I think I know how many people are going to agree with this. Unknown Pleasures, the last track. Yes, this is the original. I Remember Nothing. 6 minutes long, nearly twice as long as a lot of the tracks on here. A turgid, morose, dull, incredibly boring end to what actually beforehand is quite, even despite the production, quite a sort of aggressive, urgent, kind of desperate sounding album. And then it ends with that really long, and for me, just like, Then I heard the producer say once, he's completely up his own backside. I heard him say once, I really like to do that with most records. I like to bring a downer at the end because it makes you want more. It makes me want to turn it off and wish I just hadn't taken. I don't listen to that last track because for me it just ruins the flow. You've got that incredible beforehand. You've got Interzone, 2 minutes 10 seconds of wondrous marvelousness, and then there's it. Excruciating finale. So yes, right. He actually did his job. It does make me want to play the album again, but it makes me want to play it before that track is even halfway through. That's off. I'm starting again. And finally, Neil Young's Zuma. Another album I don't really play all the way through anymore. I used to, but I was always, I mean, I struggled a bit with Danger Bird, but I always, it grates on my nerves, ending with Through My Sails. When you've had Cortez the Killer on beforehand, Through My Sails just sounds like a dull throwaway to the Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young days, because they're on that track. And it just sounds like one of theirs. It doesn't fit in with the rest of the record, which again has a far more kind of, because it's just him singing in the main, it's more personal and sort of powerful and emotive in places. And there are some lovely songs on here as well, like Barstool Blues, or Pardon My Heart, Don't Cry No Tears. And, Crazy Horse, really fantastic backing on this album. But then you end with Through My Sails, and just what a dull ending. A weak finale to an album, which otherwise, if it could have built to a crescendo or ended on any other track without Crosby, Stills and Nash on it, would have made this a much better album. Do you agree? Does anyone care? Let's do that emoji. I'll see you later. Who cares?